This is a production of Cornell University.
Hopefully it goes. Thank you all for coming out. As Nina said, I'm going to just talk a little bit about my Dreer experience. I said Impatiens and Vegetables as the title, but it ended up being a whole lot of other stuff as well. So I'll see how much I can kind of cram into 40 minutes and still hopefully have more room for other things to talk about. Before I get started though, this was one of the coolest disease phenotypes I've ever seen. This is tomato necrotic ring spot virus on chili pepper. And they had a whole population of them. Most of them look like most diseased plants, but there was one genotype that had this just really unusual phenotype from the disease. And I thought I have to, preserve this for posterity. So I just wanted to share that. I'll be taking you through my 3 main internships that I wrote the Dreer for. The Tropical Vegetable Research Center in kind of central Thailand, Chia Thai Company in western Thailand, and then Prince of Songkla University in southern Thailand, just north of the border with Malaysia. I'll get a little bit into some of the side trips I did as well. I had to cut some of them because there was a lot of traveling, but just to kind of give you an idea of some of the horticulture that I kind of experienced while I was over there. So for a lot of people asked me where Thailand was, so I thought this would be a good kind of primer. It's right there. It's not Taiwan. That was another kind of source of confusion. And people also asked me why I was interested in Thailand. One of the big things is Thailand has a really strong agricultural sector. They get a lot of government support for it. The royal family has poured a lot of personal money into it. They've set up kind of what they call the royal projects, which are kind of specific projects to kind of push the boundaries of agriculture within Thailand. They like to say that they're self-sufficient for all crops except wheat. I've never actually seen any figures to support this, but it's something they like to say. It's mostly because of the range of climates within Thailand. In the northern part, you have temperate areas where you can grow things like cherries and apples, and then the rest of the country is pretty tropical. You can grow things like rice and pretty much any other sort of tropical food. They did try growing wheat, and I met with a wheat breeder a few years back there, and she said they could grow it during the middle of their winter in the coolest part of the country, but otherwise it was a complete flop. They do grow barley though. They have a huge brewing industry there. It's also a really a big hotspot for biodiversity. There's over 100 native impatiens species. Most of you all, I think, know I did my Ph.D. on impatiens. It's a genus of 1,300, so that's a pretty good chunk of them. There's also tons of other families. It's Zingiberaceae. I mean, lots of towns have 2 or 3 native species that they use in their cooking that adds kind of different flavors and spices. So it's just kind of fun to be like walking around and seeing all these species that might be really, really local to that area. Nice climate, good food. Those weren't my primary reasons, but they certainly didn't hurt. And also I have some personal history with Thailand. My ex of 5 years was Thai. I speak a little bit of Thai from being with him. And I've been to Thailand twice before, which kind of fed into a lot of the internships that I have here. The first internship I did was with the Tropical Vegetable Research Center, but it was at Kaset Fair University at their Impatiens campus. And I tried to put little red dots on the different areas that I went to in Thailand. So this is about 2 hours west of Bangkok. Kaset Fair University is the premier agriculture university in Thailand. Their main campus is in downtown Bangkok, but their Impatiens campus is huge. They refer to it as resort-like, which I think is kind of nice. They have lots of bodies of water. Even the drainage canals are populated with water lilies and lotuses, and cannas. So it's a really beautiful campus just to be wandering around. I happened to be there during the Loi Krathong festival, which is they build these little altars out of biodegradable material and put them on the water to worship one of the water goddesses. So it's a really neat way to kind of see floriculture in action there. This was one of my favorite ones. This is a banana flower that they peeled back and pinned to itself. And then they used banana stem in the middle and put gomophrena or globe amaranth in there. And then you light incense and candles. Ixora, the tropical honeysuckle, was a really nice one. I mean, I saw all sorts of different things. In the past, they'd made them out of different materials, but now there's kind of a eco-friendly twist to it so that the fish can finish them off and they don't end up clogging up the waterways. But you can see it gets pretty crowded. This was towards the end of the festival, and this is, again, just one university. If you go into downtown Bangkok, I mean, the entire canals and rivers are clogged with these different kind of floating altars. Oh, and there was a rhinoceros beetle crossing the road, forgot to mention. So the Tropical Vegetable Research Center is a national organization. I got a lot of confusion with the AVRDC, or the World Vegetable Center. And there's even more confusion because they're right next to each other at the Kampingsan campus. But it's a distinct organization. They have a few different mandates. Germplasm is one of the big ones, but they also do breeding, and they do a lot of outreach work. It was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, I've lived in the tropics before, but there's just a huge, incredible diversity of species that they work with and work on maintaining and improving. Things like, this is a relative of black pepper that was a popular spice before chili peppers were discovered. Gac fruit, it's a relative of bitter melon that you eat the arils. They're high in carotenoids. And then lots of plants just growing spontaneously around there. This is a wild cleome that's used as a vegetable in parts of Thailand. You use it with a chili paste and eat it like that, or you can use a pot herb. But it was incredible, I think of this as an ornamental. Like, you see them outside the Cornell store, but to see them growing here as wild plants is really mind-boggling. As I mentioned, they do a lot of outreach. We led several tours for classes. This was one professor, or one teacher from a high school group climbing one of the trees to bring down fruits to distribute to the students. A lot of students, especially as urbanization kind of goes on, are getting less and less in touch with the kind of like rural roots and some of the indigenous knowledge. So they do a really great job in their indigenous vegetable garden, which I'll touch on in the next slide, trying to educate people about some of the different herbs and vegetables that you can use. And it was really popular, everyone wanted to try it. The fruit was terrible. It's a balimbi, I don't know if any of you know it, which is incredibly sour from oxalic acid. I never eat it fresh, but everyone was excited just for the new experience of it, I think, more than anything else. As I mentioned, they have the Indigenous Vegetable Garden, and this is actually what had originally attracted me to the TVRC. This is a pretty nice garden kind of on the edge of their research facility. And when I was there before, it had kind of been just in the planning stages, but now they've really set it up into distinct areas based on the different regions of Thailand. Thailand has the northeast area, the north area, central area, and south. And they have kind of theme gardens based on those regions now, each with their own kind of herbs and their own vegetables. Kasanai Chaipech was a master's student when I was there about 7 years ago. He's now the head of Germplasm, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of every single plant within that garden. He'd go and we'd pass it, and he could tell me the Thai name and the local dialect name and how you could use it for food and what you used it for medicine and scientific studies. It was just incredible. In this case, he's eating the petiole of one of the taro relatives. But just lots of unusual plants and unusual uses for plants that I've been familiar with. This is a torch ginger. I'd seen it in Hawaii. It's used as a cut flower. It's really nice because it lasts a long time. But in Thailand, it's also used in soups. It has kind of a gingery, tangy flavor to it. You can also eat it fresh. It's a little fibrous, I think, to eat fresh, but in soup, I think it's pretty tasty. And so you could have it as kind of a dual purpose that way. Their main claim to fame is their pepper germplasm. They have over 200 varieties of chili peppers that they've collected within, since peppers are New World, but kind of naturalized varieties. They've put them into different market classes. They've done lots of breeding work and lots of characterization as well. The two big issues for pepper production are diseases and then insects, and they've developed one variety that's pretty much immune to insect predation for the insects that are a problem in Thailand. So now they're breeding for anthracnose resistance is the other big problem. We did a lot of sorting of different varieties into these are insect damage, those are disease, these are the edible ones, and then taking data like that. But you can see a lot of variation. They have 3 or 4 different species that have been distributed within Thailand, and they also have a duplication of the AVRDC's chili pepper germplasm, which is 3,000 accessions. They didn't grow all of those out, but they do grow out the Thai ones. And they also do some seed production. This is a ghost pepper breeding project that they're working on there. The other one, I mean, they have a lot of breeding work, but this was one of the things that I thought was really interesting since it's not a crop that we see in the US that much. This is Roselle. It's a hibiscus relative, and depending on the taxonomist you ask, it might even still be a hibiscus. But if you have tea and the tea turns red, typically it's because they say it is dried hibiscus, and this is what they're talking about. In Thailand, it's used fresh instead. It's a crop that hasn't received a lot of breeding work, but the breeder, Mao, did a cross between these two varieties and got a huge range of variation: whites, pinks, peaches, short, tall, all sorts of other things. It's really interesting as a crop also because it inhibits aspergillus growth, and so people are trying to use kind of capture that. It's not as good with the red one because it dyes everything red, but there's some interest in using one of the white varieties for things like that. And then they also put it out and dry it to see what it's like for creating beverages. So it was really neat kind of seeing the kind of scope of variation they've created. While I was there, they also had their annual Kaset Fair. Kaset means agriculture in Thai. And this is a huge event. I can't believe they put it on every year, but they do. In the course of 1 week, they had 500,000 people come to the campus and kind of visit around. They grew up this entire garden within the course of 2 or 3 months, all sorts of hanging vegetables and different herbs, trying to kind of use things that we think of as edibles in a more ornamental application, which was really great. People were taking selfies all over the place and, wandering around. I mean, it was a great experience, for people who wouldn't get to grow the plants otherwise. They also sold seeds of some of the varieties they developed, and they also have a pure seed initiative to try to kind of make sure the farmers have access to good quality seed. While I was there, my big thing was brewing tea. They wanted to introduce people to kind of native Thai herbal mixtures. I prepared one from Thunbergia laurifolia, which is used as an ornamental, but it also is used as a detox, not in the kind of way that we talk about detoxing here in the US. This is actually like a detox. It can be used analogously with activated charcoal. Like they say, if you're drinking it, don't take medicine because it'll absorb the medicine. But there's also been some really good scientific studies on delaying of diabetes symptoms and improving liver function, which diabetes is a huge problem in Thailand. So it was interesting chatting with folks about it. We also sweetened it with stevia. Stevia is not a native Thai herb, so there was a lot of interest in that. We sold out of our stevia plants within the first day or two because of it. But it was a really kind of interesting way of interacting with people. And I also run into several Cornell alums. This is Prasit and Rujira Diwatanawang, who Prasit did his master's in entomology here. Rujira did her Ph.D. in horticulture a few years back. And then that's T. Havanada, who I never actually met when he was at Cornell, but he was apparently in plant breeding. So he's a professor at Kaset Fair Kampingsan, so that was fun chatting with him too. The fair takes over the entire campus. I could give a whole presentation just on it, but I tried to encapsulate some of the more interesting things. They have a huge orchid show as part of it. And I'm used to orchid shows in the US, but when you can grow them in the tropics and you have the ideal weather for it, I mean, the scale just becomes amazing. An Oncidium tunnel, a Mocara tunnel, and then all of these incredible installations. This was about maybe a fifth of the whole setup that they had there. And then they also have some more traditional judging things, and they had orchids for sale. That was the other thing, price-wise. You can buy what would be a $40 Vanda orchid for about $6 there, or collector's Nepenthes. These are some of the rarer ones they had. A rare species was $6 compared to what you'd pay in the US of like $60, $70. They had air plants for 30 cents. Lest you think it's all plants, they also had animals. This was from their cattle breeding program. They're doing a lot of work trying to introgress good genetics into the landrace varieties in Thailand. And they also did some work with chickens, which I don't know a lot about, but I know my advisor is a big chicken fan, so I thought I'd throw the slide in. After I finished there, I moved on to Chia Thai. Chia Thai is a Thai-owned and run company based that has kind of expanded to have a market throughout most of Southeast and South Asia. They have huge market penetration within India and in Bangladesh. and they work on a really wide range of crops. Looking at this, I'm realizing I left off 2 or 3 in addition to these. They do research, but they also do production, they do seed, and they've also started branching out into agrochemicals, because that's the way that most companies seem to go. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's a seed company and proprietary and all of that. But I did take a few photos while I was there, and this was actually one of 3 cucumber breeders there. We went out and met with some farmers who'd been growing bitter melon varieties, and they were interested in trying some other varieties from the company. So we kind of gave them seeds, talked with them about their growing conditions. It was really neat. They're a household name within most of Thailand, but they're not really well known outside of Thailand yet, and that's partially a branding thing. So it was a really interesting experience. They have an alliance with Takai, but I don't know the details of it. So I got little hints and bits here and there, but very hush hush and all of that. So. They have 2 main stations within Thailand. This is Kanchanaburi, where I was for most of the time. This is Western Thailand, and I think most people from the US may have heard of Bridge over the River Kwai, or Kwai, I forget how we pronounce it here. But that's kind of what the area is known for. It's one of the hottest, driest areas in Thailand, and I was there during the hottest and driest time. But it's a nice area, very picturesque, lots of buttes and plateaus and all of that, which is really pretty. It's also a tourist area. There's not much there besides tourism and large expanses of kind of unpopulated areas. But they've managed to make melons into a kind of major crop within the area. Everyone I talked to in Thailand before I started this internship said, you have to try the melons in Kanchanaburi. They're so good. They're really famous. And they're really delicious, but they've sort of created the market for them within the company. They have a small sales area at the research station to kind of, build on that. And they have things like, melon chairs to kind of keep people interested. They're really uncomfortable because they're made of concrete, but, people love taking photos with them. And if you drive back from Kanchanaburi to Bangkok, you'll see melon stalls all along the road the entire way back because, it's become such a huge part of the reputation of the area. Their other research station is up in Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai is much cooler than Kanchanaburi or most of Thailand. It used to be a separate kingdom, so it also has a different culture and slightly different dialect because of that. You can grow a lot of crops up there that you can't grow in most of Thailand. Things like strawberries. I took a photo of this because instead of using black plastic mulch, they use leaf debris and put it down individually. So it's kind of a more eco-friendly form. I got to explore the town. It's becoming a huge tourist trap. There's been a lot of movies coming out about it, and so people are kind of flocking there by the dozens. But it still has an incredible flower market where I got to see kind of what's hot and what's not. And then this was also, these are the kind of traditional Thai arrangements of flowers, kind of garlands that are placed on altars or hung from your rear windshield mirror if you're more modern. But seeing different kind of combinations of flowers, which was really fun. And I was also visited by some folks from Cornell, but I'll skip about that. After I finished with Chia Thai, I moved down to southern Thailand, to Hat Yai, which is in Songkla, so it's like right above Malaysia. It's like, yeah. Hat Yai has sort of a bad reputation, unfortunately, with most of the world. There was a bombing there a few years ago, and most of the Thai people I told I was going there had never been there and joked about, dodging bullets and things like that. I didn't see a single gun the entire time I was there, and which is very different from the US in some ways. And I also felt incredibly safe. It's a really interesting area because it's near what used to be a port town, and so it has a lot of cultural exchange, a lot of ethnic Chinese that came in about 100 years ago. And also it was also a separate kingdom, and so there's a lot of interface with local Muslim community that had been part of that kingdom as well. So it's really well known for good food culture and other things. This is the professor I worked with, Achan Parkpum Panichai Yupakaranan. He's really well known within pharmacognosy. Pharmacognosy is the study of making medicine from plants, which I'd never heard of before I came there, but it's a huge field. He has grad students from all over the world and ongoing exchanges with even more countries. He spent a month in Hawaii while I was there doing some other research. And so it was a really interesting insight into kind of academic culture. They do a lot of extractions of marigolds and ginger and other things, trying to isolate out different compounds and then testing on sometimes animal models, sometimes cell models. So it was just a really different experience than what I'm used to. I also ran into Adirek Rodkong, who did his Ph.D. here a few years back and graduated in horticulture as well. He's now a professor doing a lot of the farm program there. All of the undergrads who start in agriculture or anything related to that are required to spend their first semester working on the student-run farm. And they grow all of these different vegetables, and it's really fun. Some of them have no background in it, so you see them taking selfies, as the cabbage gets larger and larger, and then they take it, to market, and they're sitting there trying to sell you on their cabbage. It was a really cool experience, getting to see them, and he was kind of intrinsically involved in that. The area is really nice, as I mentioned. It's sort of near the sea, so there's a lot of beaches and other things. This is one of the emblematic things. It's a mermaid, kind of like the one in Copenhagen. And then a Naga statue, which is one of the mythical creatures in Thailand. I also got to explore some of the wetlands nearby, which was really neat. I didn't know Thailand had wetlands. But I went to one of the biopreserves, and one of the things they had in kind of payment for us getting a tour was they asked us to replant a field of palm trees the old-fashioned way, using a stick. So all of the students, these were pharmacy students with no background in agriculture at all, so everyone was really excited to sit there and pound the stick into the ground, put in the palm trees, which was really great. I went there with a few, this is a postdoc from India, Ahmad, and Faisan, a grad student from Pakistan. And we also got to try pure palm juice while we were there, where they cut off the tip of the male inflorescence of the palm, collect the sap, and then you drink it. They also had palm moonshine, which they were Muslim, so they didn't try, and I took their share instead. It was incredibly potent, but very interesting. I could see it catching on here. My research work there was doing leaf resin extraction. The idea that I pitched to Achan Pak was looking at impatiens for different compounds, specifically naphthoquinones. Impatiens produce chemicals very similar to the ones in henna, so they can be used for dyeing, but they also have methylated forms and other forms that aren't found within lawsone, which is the plant that henna is extracted from. So we were looking at them and trying to see what we could kind of do with that. This is the dried leaves. This is of the henna tree. They had one growing there, ground up, and then extracting in methanol, evaporating it, and then running thin layer chromatography. It was a whole new experience for me. As many of you know, I'm much more of a whole plant person, so this was kind of a fun addition. We had a hard time with the process. We ran both HPLC and TLC, and we would get conflicting results about, we would find henna compounds in impatiens, but not in the henna. So, it was like, there's still some stuff that we're kind of sorting out, but we're talking about maybe doing that down the road. We did find a whole bunch of compounds that hadn't been described, though, so it's some really interesting work for the future, and it could also be addressed for conservation work for some of the native impatient species. I took quite a few side trips while I was there, as I mentioned. These were mostly around Bangkok. One of the things, since this is mostly a plant crowd, that I wanted to point out is Bangkok, despite being pretty metropolitan and developed, has really made an effort to create green spaces. This is outside one of the bougier malls in Bangkok, and it has a really nice planting of ground covers, grasses. There's a green wall nearby, and this is the second floor of a metro stop. So they've really made an effort for that. This is the 8th floor of another mall. They've built an entire outdoor garden with waterfalls and all sorts of other plants. So it was really kind of neat seeing how they kind of push the green into an urban landscape. I took some obligatory temple shots. I'm not really a religious person, but I mean, they're pretty great and ornate. This was a Chinese temple that was in the middle of one of the Thai temples. Huge Buddhas, like 2 or 3 stories tall. I have other photos of them, but it was a really interesting cultural experience for that. One of the side trips I took in Chiang Mai was to the Queen Sirikit Botanic Garden. If you have a chance, it's an incredible garden to visit. I went there mostly because Ek Suksatan is one of the world authorities on impatiens. He's done a ton of research work. He's named countless species, and he runs a lot of their research program. The garden itself is really interesting. They have a canopy walk, and like I said, Chiang Mai is a slightly different climate, so you get to see kind of a whole different range of plants. They had a rose garden, which is not what I expected to see in Thailand, but they have cultivars that are really well adapted to the climate there, and tons of people taking selfies with them. And then a lot of other plants as well, bromeliad house, and a terrestrial orchid breeding program, which I thought was really neat. You hear a lot of work going on in Thailand about dendrobium orchids and vanda orchids, but they've done a lot of work with, this is calanthe and also phaeus. So it's something that, I think is kind of on the cusp. Eck was sort of complaining, though, that he wants to push impatiens, but he said orchids are always considered so much sexier, so they get all the funding money. So hopefully that'll change in the future. I did find a ton of different impatiens species. This was everything that was, a small selection of what was in flower at the time. They have just an incredible variety of them that Eck and other researchers have collected from different parts of Thailand and the surrounding area. This is Kingdong wardii from Myanmar. It's cleistogamous. The flower is never fully open. Other species, again, all of these just growing within the area. Ones that form caudixes, so kind of woody, sort of bulbules type things at the base of the plant to kind of hang on through drought regions. There was one that was neon blue that unfortunately wasn't in flower, but they had photos of. And they said one of the hard things from a conservation point of view is they don't have the funding to really keep the accessions going. So it's just kind of whatever grows kind of keeps growing, and they keep hoping it'll, persist. We're in talks right now with the New York Botanic Garden and Stribing Botanic Garden in San Francisco to see if we can get some conservation work going on with these. Maybe some breeding work, but we'll see. So it was just an incredible experience from that point of view, too. I took a side trip to Taiwan because my visa ran out, and met up with a Gesneria breeder who I knew from the US, Wei Kwong Lin. He's now working at Bayer out in Nebraska. But he kind of showed me around. I'd never been to Taiwan, and so I was amazed. Again, a lot of use of green space there. This is a park that's, I think, 2 years old, but they've completely turned over what was a slum before. We took a bike trip through the middle of town. They've really worked on kind of building up green spaces. We hiked to the top of a mountain. Unfortunately, it was near the beginning of Chinese New Year, so everyone was hiking to the top of the mountain. But it was a really great experience, and really, again, it's an interesting intersection between Chinese culture and tropical climate. So orchids being utilized in different ways, really neat. I also went to Malaysia because it was a really quick hop from southern Thailand to Malaysia, and met up with 2 Cornell alums from food science, Adi Sikin and Tengju Tan. They're both professors in food science now. I'll get into some of the botanical gardens there, although again, I could go on and on about that. But Tengju works at a university next to the ocean, so I went and visited him there and explored the plant life and some of the beaches a little bit. But also went around downtown Kuala Lumpur, and again, I was surprised at some of the use of plants there. These are irises and ornamental grasses that they keep alive throughout the year inside. They weren't in bloom at this time, but I'm told they're really spectacular when they do bloom, and throughout the entire inside of a mall. As I mentioned, there's 2 main botanic gardens that I visited, one inside Kuala Lumpur and one about an hour south near one of the research stations. Orchids are becoming a really big thing in Malaysia. There's been a push to compete with the Singaporean market. And arandas, which are descended from this one, this is a Arachnus species, have become kind of the go-to. Unfortunately, while I was there was some construction going on, but they kind of had a nice twist on it and paid artists to create these murals on the areas that were under construction, kind of like when the Commons was under construction, they did the same thing. But it was really nice. The things that were in flower were really great, and they had Heliconia species I'd never seen before at Putrajaya. Both of them were more kind of walking gardens than anything else. One thing I did see, and I haven't seen this as much in US botanic gardens, is they had a whole chart on how to read a plant label, which I think is something that gets overlooked a lot, but was really nice. And it's in English and Malay. So, I saw a lot of people stopping and looking at this. They had this at the different entrances. So it really kind of enhanced the experience for people who were visiting. I'll finish up here with Singapore. For those of you who don't know, Singapore is this teensy little island right off the end of Malaysia. It's essentially a city-state, and it's one of the economic powerhouses of Southeast Asia. They've also managed to maintain a pretty green presence despite being a city-state. This is one of about 5 or 6 gardens I saw in their airport that they even have a dendrobium orchid that they've named after the airport. It's really, devotion. They have like artist stations outside these to like teach kids how to draw flowers, things like that. Really neat ways of engaging with the public. And Singapore is also the only country in the world that has a hybrid as their national flower, which is Papiliolanthe miswakeen. I think it used to be called Vanda. It's one of the Vandaceous types. I went to Singapore Botanic Garden, and it is spectacular. It's been around since the 1800s. It's really well established. They have an orchid breeding program that's, I think, at least 50 years old, if not older than that. They've registered thousands of orchid hybrids. They maintain one of the few chunks of native rainforest within Singapore, which was just spectacular, and have a lot of theme gardens. I was captivated by the evolution garden because I thought that would probably lead to all sorts of outcry in the US, but it seemed to be a really well done garden there. This tree is featured on the back of some Singaporean currency, so it's really integral to Singaporean culture. They also had a banana and ginger garden. I'd never seen a banana like this before and was just so excited. I think we should have these all over the place. And then orchid fountains as well. One thing that I did find really interesting, but I thought was kind of odd, is they had suggestions about, oh, this plant would be great for home landscaping, or oh, this plant, could be used in this sort of arrangement. But Singapore, there's almost no garden space because it's mostly in apartments. So I thought it was a great effort. I think that would be something maybe areas with more of a kind of footprint for the housing could really appreciate. I also went to Gardens by the Bay, which is the other botanic garden there. Full disclosure, I just accepted a job with them, so I'll try not to wax too eloquent about it. But they are unique in that they're one of the few gardens that has a conservatory that's cooled. Singapore is right on the equator, so they cool both of the conservatories to grow temperate type plants so that people in the tropics can see them. They like to kind of build themselves as kind of creating a sort of Central Park vibe. They're in the center of what'll be the downtown business district, and they're expanding. They own several properties as well. There's a lot of really neat architectural features, like these are, they call the super trees, which are obviously not trees, but they've put in a lot of epiphytic plants to kind of create that same sort of feeling. And they have a lot of crosswalks at different levels to see different things too, which I thought was really neat. One of the conservatories is called the Flower Dome. It has kind of seasonal changing exhibits. The funding is amazing, and so they bring in huge amounts of tulips, huge amounts of dahlias from all over the world. I was there, the first time I think was around the Chinese New Year celebration, and they had just a huge field of dahlias in the middle of the dome. The second time was Tulip Mania, and they had tulips all over the place. Selfie stations. The garden is geared more towards people who don't have a background in horticulture, and they're trying to kind of bring people in. So, it wasn't like some of the other botanic gardens I've been to where it's very kind of much more about oh, this is a botanical gem. There was a lot more spectacle, but kind of trying to attract people with that and then kind of teach them whether they liked it or not kind of thing. So, they also had brought in 5 full-size palm trees from Chile, several thousand-year-old olive trees from Spain. I mean, it's a really incredible undertaking, and the garden's only 3 years old. Last year, I think they said they had over 8 million visitors, so it's really taken off. The other dome is a cloud forest that they've built inside. It has several waterfalls and then also walks going around different parts of it. It's, I think, 7 stories tall, and mostly focuses on epiphytes and other things like that, but I found an Impatiens species and was really excited. I was in the middle of one of the ponds, though, and so I kept leaning over, trying to get a better and better photo, and finally managed to get pulled back before I fell in. But it was right in the middle of the carnivorous plant area, which I thought was really neat, too. And they try to get people engaged. They have a whole display of stalactites and stalagmites that they've imported, and geodes to kind of, add to kind of the feel to it. But people seem to really appreciate it. The outside gardens are really nice as well. There's a lot of water features because it is by the bay. And it used to be brackish water. It's now mostly fresh water. And then it's also become a very popular spot for sportsmen. So as I mentioned, they're kind of creating a Central Park vibe. So a lot of joggers go through. And if you get there at around 6 in the evening when the workday ends, you'll get like almost a traffic jam of joggers kind of jogging through here. It's gotten to the point they now actually have host a marathon to kind of channel some of that, I think. They have different restaurants around the area as well to kind of accommodate it. But I think it's kind of a sneaky way to introduce people to plants too. You get to see things that are flowering at the same time. With that, I'll just finish up. A few people had asked me about tips for applying for the Dreer, and so I thought I'd just mention a few things if any of you are interested in applying. One of the things I think that really is important is having a focused theme or plan for your proposal. I've heard several times, and I think the committee told me as well, making sure that you can really definitively say something rather than, I want to go to Thailand, just kind of like saying, okay, this is what you're focusing on. Personally, I think outlining your internship with the folks at the place would be really good. I speak from kind of my own personal experience here where I didn't outline some of the things and it was like, oh, you want to do that? Well, the person who would do that is out of town. So kind of making sure that everything's kind of planned out before you go. Figure out your visas early on so you're not leaving the country every month trying to renew it like I did for the last 4 months. But if not, use it as an excuse to travel. Write your reports well in advance. That's just something I struggle with. And take lots of side trips. I kind of felt conflicted sometimes about like, oh, I'm in here, I should be doing more of this and more of that. But I also would say, it's important to take some time off too. There were times where you just kind of sit in a coffee shop and appreciate the fact that you are where you are. You don't have to be filling each moment. With that, I'll thank the Dreer Committee. Thank you so, so much for this incredible opportunity. It was really life-changing, and not just because of the job offer. And it's just totally been eye-opening in so many wonderful ways. I'd like to thank my Ph.D. committee since they helped me kind of get pushed through the last part of it and really held on to kind of hold me to it to get everything in. And then I'd like to thank the people at the different organizations who were kind of in charge while I was there. Chamnan Songkla, who's the head of PR at the TVRC, Supat Mekianon, who's the head of plant breeding at Chiatai, and then Parkpum Panichai Yupakaranan, who's the professor at Prince of Songkla University. They all were just really welcoming and were really helpful. So with that, I'll take some questions. This was something I saw as a souvenir and just thought that was really cool. But anyway, thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.